Captain Lee Dongyan sat in his small office aboard the UES Harmony and looked at the stack of papers on his desk. The papers were not very tall, but they were very thick. Each page had been printed with care and checked 3 times by different people. This was how humans did things when they wanted to make contact with new alien friends. The Galactic Council had sent them a simple message 2 weeks ago. The message said humans could apply to join the big family of space nations. All they had to do was fill out some basic forms and send them back. Captain Lee thought this sounded easy enough. What the Galactic Council did not know was that humans had a very special way of filling out forms. They did not just answer the questions. They answered every question that might be asked later too. They also answered questions that nobody had thought to ask yet. This was just how humans worked. Captain Lee picked up the first form from his desk. It was called Application for Initial Contact Status. The form had 12 questions on it. Simple. Questions like what is your species name and where do you come from? Captain Lee had answered all 12 questions, but he had also added 47 pages of extra information. The first question asked for the species name. Captain Lee wrote human. Then he added a note that explained where the word human came from. Then he added another note about all the other names humans called themselves in different languages. Then he added a list of every language humans spoke. The list took up 6 pages. The second question asked about their home planet. Captain Lee wrote Earth. Then he added the exact location of Earth using 17 different measurement systems. He included detailed maps of Earth from space. He added information about Earth's weather, its oceans, and all the animals that lived there. He also included a note about why humans called their planet Earth instead of water when most of it was covered in water. By the time Captain Lee finished answering all 12 questions, he had filled 47 pages. But he was not done yet. Human rules said that any important document needed to have supporting papers. So Captain Lee added more papers. He added Form 2A, which was a list of all the humans on his ship. This form included each person's full name, their job, their birthday, and their favorite food. Form 2B was a complete health report for everyone on the ship. Form 2C was a list of all the supplies they carried. This list included how many pencils they had and what kind of soap they used. Captain Lee also added Environmental Impact Statement 1 through 6. These papers explained how his ship might affect any planet they visited. The papers covered everything from the noise his engines made to what would happen if someone dropped garbage by accident. They even included plans for cleaning up any mess they might make. Then there were the cultural sensitivity documents. Captain Lee had read that many alien species had different customs. He did not want to be rude by accident, so he included 20 pages of questions about alien customs. He asked about proper greeting methods, gift-giving rules, and whether it was okay to make eye contact. He also included a promise that all humans on his ship would take a class about alien manners before meeting anyone. The safety protocols took up another 15 pages. These papers explained every safety rule humans followed on their ships. They covered what to do if the air system broke, how to handle fires, and proper procedures for emergency landings. Captain Lee even included the recipe for emergency food rations just in case the aliens wanted to know what humans ate. When they were hungry, insurance documentation was very important to humans, so Captain Lee included all of it. There were papers showing that his ship was insured against accidents. There were papers showing that each crew member was insured in case they got hurt. There were even papers showing insurance for any damage they might cause to alien property by accident. The insurance papers had been signed by 12 different companies and notarized by an official Earth government person. Captain Lee looked at his completed application and smiled. He had done good work. Every question was answered completely. Every possible problem was covered by proper paperwork. Every rule was followed exactly. This was the human way. He called his communications officer Kim Suman to his office. Officer Kim was very good at sending messages to faraway places. She looked at the stack of papers on Captain Lee's desk and nodded. This was normal for human paperwork. Send this to the Galactic Council, Captain Lee said. Make sure they get every page. Officer Kim loaded all the papers into the communication system. The system had to compress the files to make them small enough to send across space. Even compressed, the files were very large. The message took 3 hours to send completely far away on the Galactic Council space station. An alien computer received the human message. The computer was built to handle normal first contact applications. Most species sent simple messages, with basic information. The computer expected maybe 5 or 10 pages of text. When the human files started downloading, the computer became confused. The files kept growing bigger and bigger. First 10 pages, then 50 pages, then 100 pages. The computer had never seen anything like this. The computer tried to organize the human files, but there were too many different types of papers. There were application forms and supporting documents and environmental reports and safety manuals, and insurance policies and cultural questionnaires. Every paper was properly labeled and cross-referenced with other papers. Alien technician Zixthon was working the night shift when the computer started making warning sounds. He looked at his screen and saw error messages everywhere. The computer was trying to process the human application, but it kept running out of memory space. What kind of species sends 847 pages for a simple contact application? Zixthon asked himself. He tried to restart the computer, but the same thing happened again. The human files were too complex for the standard processing system. Every time the computer tried to read one document, it found references to dozens of other documents. Every document was connected to every other document in some way. Zixthon called his supervisor Kelnara. Supervisor Kelnara was an expert in alien psychology and first contact procedures. She had processed thousands of applications from new species. She had never seen anything like the human submission. They included insurance papers for their pencils, Kelnara said as she read through the files. They have environmental impact statements for their coffee-making equipment. They wrote a 15-page report about proper bathroom etiquette for meetings with unknown species. The two aliens spent the rest of their shift trying to understand the human application. Every page they read led to more pages. The humans had thought of everything. They had answers for questions that the Galactic Council had never thought to ask. They had solutions for problems that had never happened before. By morning, word of the human application had spread through the Galactic Council offices. Other aliens came to look at the impossible paperwork. Nobody could believe that one species could create so much documentation for such a simple request. Council Director Veltar called an emergency meeting. All the department heads gathered in the main conference room. The human application was displayed on the big screen, but nobody could read it all. There was simply too much information. In 3,000 years of first contact procedures, we have never encountered anything like this, Director Veltar announced. These humans have somehow turned a basic greeting into a comprehensive legal document. Their paperwork is more detailed than our own internal operating manuals. The aliens in the meeting room looked at each other with worry. If humans put this much effort into a simple hello message, what would they do for actual important business? How much paperwork would they create for trade agreements or peace treaties? Nobody knew the answer, but they all suspected it would be more paperwork than the galaxy was ready to handle. Trade Representative Park Min-ho stepped off his transport ship and looked around the Galactic Council space station. He carried a small briefcase in his left hand and smiled at the alien security guards. The guards looked nervous because they had heard stories about human paperwork. They were right to be nervous. Park Min-ho had come to the station to discuss simple trade between humans and other species. Earth had many things that aliens might want, like coffee, chocolate, and music. Aliens had many things that humans wanted, like advanced metals, energy crystals, and faster-than-light travel technology. This should have been an easy conversation. The security guards led Park Min-ho through long hallways to the trade offices. Other aliens stopped their work to stare at him as he walked past. Word had spread quickly about the human application that had crashed the Council's computer systems 3 times. Everyone wanted to see what this human would do next. Trade Director Kolves waited in his office for the human visitor. Director Kolves had handled trade negotiations with hundreds of different species. Most negotiations were simple. Species would list what they had and what they wanted. Then both sides would agree on fair prices. The whole process usually took 1 or 2 days. Park Min-ho knocked on the office door and entered. when he heard Director Colves call out. The human looked very ordinary. He was not very tall or very strong. He did not carry any weapons. He just had his small briefcase and a friendly smile. "Thank you for meeting with me today," Park Min-ho said as he sat down. "I have brought a simple trade proposal for your consideration." Director Colves felt relieved. The word simple was good news. Maybe humans were not as complicated as their first contact application had suggested. Maybe this meeting would be normal and easy. Park Min-ho opened his briefcase and began taking out papers. He took out one stack of papers, then another stack, then another. Director Colves watched with growing alarm as the papers kept coming. The briefcase seemed to hold much more than should have been possible. "This is our basic trade proposal," Park Min-ho said as he placed a stack of papers on the desk. The stack was 15 centimeters tall. "These are the supporting documents," he said as he placed down another stack. "These are the legal frameworks," he said with a third stack. Director Colves stared at the papers covering his desk. There had to be thousands of pages. This was not simple at all. This was the opposite of simple. "Perhaps we could start with just the basic proposal," Director Colves suggested. He picked up the first stack and opened it to the first page. The page was titled, "Comprehensive Trade Framework Between the Human Species and All Current and Future Members of the Galactic Council." The first section of the proposal listed every product that humans wanted to trade. But it did not just say coffee and chocolate. It included the complete history of coffee, including where it was grown and how it was prepared. It explained the chemical makeup of chocolate and why humans enjoyed eating it. It listed 47 different ways to prepare coffee and 63 different types of chocolate. Each product description included quality standards, safety requirements, packaging specifications, and storage instructions. The coffee section alone was 22 pages long. The chocolate section was 31 pages. There were sections for music, art, literature, food, technology, and cultural experiences. Each section was longer than most complete trade agreements. Director Colves turned to the second page and found a detailed family tree of Park Min-ho going back 8 generations. The family tree included the occupation, educational background, and psychological evaluation of every person listed. There was a note explaining that this information was included to establish Park Min-ho's trustworthiness and expertise in trade matters. The third page contained medical records for Park Min-ho, showing that he was healthy and mentally capable of making trade decisions. The medical records included test results, doctor recommendations, and statements from 3 different mental health professionals. There was even a note from Park Min-ho's dentist confirming that he had good oral hygiene. "Why do you include your dental records in a trade proposal?" Director Colves asked. "Article 47 of Human Trade Regulations requires full disclosure of negotiator health status," Park Min-ho replied. "Good dental health indicates attention to detail and personal responsibility. These are important qualities for trade representatives." Director Colves did not know what to say to this answer. He kept reading and found sections on environmental protection, worker safety, quality control, dispute resolution, emergency procedures, insurance requirements, tax implications, and cultural sensitivity training. Every section was written in careful detail with references to other sections. The dispute resolution section was particularly impressive. It included 14 different methods for solving problems between trading partners. There were procedures for formal mediation, informal discussion, expert arbitration, and community involvement. There was even a procedure for solving disputes through competitive cooking contests if both sides agreed. Park Min-ho noticed that Director Colves looked overwhelmed. "Do not worry," he said kindly. "I also brought the simplified version for species who prefer less detail." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out another stack of papers. This stack was only 8 centimeters tall. Director Colves felt a small amount of hope until he realized that the simplified version was still longer than most complete treaties. While this meeting was happening, news of human trade practices was spreading throughout the galaxy. A cargo ship captain named Thex Moran was telling other aliens about his encounter with human customs officials. His ship had visited Earth to pick up some coffee for delivery to a mining colony. The human customs officials had been very polite and very thorough. They had inspected every container on his ship. They had tested the air quality in every room. They had checked his paperwork using 17 different verification methods. They had given his crew complete medical examinations and safety training courses. They made me fill out forms for everything, Thex Moran told his friends. Forms for what cargo I was carrying, forms for where the cargo was going, forms for what route I planned to take, forms for what I would do if my engines broke down. They even made me fill out forms about what I ate for breakfast. The other aliens laughed, but they also felt worried. If humans required this much paperwork for simple cargo delivery, what would they require for more complicated business? Meanwhile, on the war planet Mortax Prime, Supreme General Vexthorn was reading intelligence reports about the new human species. His military advisors had told him that humans appeared weak and harmless. Their ships were not very fast, and their weapons were not very powerful. General Vexthorn decided that humans would make good targets for tribute collection. General Vexthorn sent a simple message to the human government. The message said that humans must pay tribute to the Vorthon Empire or face destruction. This was how the Vorthons always dealt with weak new species. Usually the weak species paid tribute immediately rather than risk war. The human response arrived 3 days later. General Vexthorn expected a message of surrender and fear. Instead, he received a polite note from Administrator Choi Hana of the Human Diplomatic Corps. The note thanked him for his interest in establishing relations with humanity. It also included a request for clarification about his tribute demands. Administrator Choi explained that human law required proper documentation for all financial transactions. She included a 67-page questionnaire about the Vorthon tribute system. The questionnaire asked about tax rates, payment schedules, legal authority, dispute procedures, and enforcement mechanisms. The questionnaire also asked for the Vorthons to provide their business license, tax identification number, proof of insurance and environmental impact statements for their war fleet. It requested detailed specifications for their weapon systems, including safety certifications and proper disposal procedures for ammunition. Waste. Administrator Choi explained that humans would be happy to consider paying tribute once all the proper paperwork was completed. She estimated that the documentation process would take approximately 6 months if the Vorthons were very efficient with their responses. General Vexthorn stared at the human response in confusion. Nobody had ever responded to military threats with requests for business licenses. His advisors did not know what to do either. The Vorthon Empire was very good at fighting wars, but they were very bad at filling out forms. The questionnaire was written in clear, simple language, but it asked about things that the Vorthons had never considered. They had never thought about environmental impact statements for military operations. They had never gotten insurance for their war fleet. They did not even know what a tax identification number was. General Vexthorn called a meeting with his top military commanders. They gathered in the war room to discuss this strange new problem. The humans had not refused to pay tribute. They had not declared war. They had simply asked for paperwork that the Vorthons did not have. Maybe we should just attack them without tribute, suggested General Kexmar. We could, General Vexthorn replied. But what if they ask for attack permits? What if they want environmental impact statements for orbital bombardment? What if they require safety inspections for our boarding parties? Supreme Admiral Yang Jiwoo sat in her command center aboard the flagship Soul's Pride and read the intelligence reports with great interest. Her aide, Captain Kim Tae-hyung, had collected dozens of reports from across the galaxy about human encounters with alien species. Every report mentioned the same thing. Aliens were terrified of human paperwork. Admiral Yang found this very amusing. She had spent 30 years in the human military dealing with forms, procedures, and documentation requirements. She knew that humans were naturally good at organizing information and following rules. What she had not known was that this made other species afraid. Captain Kim. She called to her aide. These reports say that aliens consider our standard operating procedures to be weapons of mass destruction. Is this true? Captain Kim nodded seriously. Yes, Admiral. The Galactic Council has classified human bureaucracy as a clear threat to universal peace. They say our paperwork is more dangerous than plasma cannons. Admiral Yang laughed out loud. She had been worried that humans would be outgunned by advanced alien technology. Instead, it seemed that aliens were overwhelmed by advanced human organization. This gave her ideas about how to protect human interests in the galaxy. The ideas became important very quickly. 3 days later, the Nexari Confederation sent a formal declaration of war to the human government. The Nexari were known throughout the galaxy as aggressive militarists who solved problems by shooting first and asking questions later. They had conquered 17 different species in the past century. The Nexari Declaration was very simple. It said that humans had to surrender all their territory and technology or face total destruction. The Nexari fleet would arrive at Earth in 30 days to enforce this demand. This was their standard approach to dealing with weak new species. Admiral Yang received orders to prepare Earth's defenses against the coming invasion, but instead of charging weapons and preparing battle plans, she decided to try a different approach. If aliens were afraid of human paperwork, then paperwork would be her weapon. Admiral Yang called a meeting with her senior staff. She gathered her best administrative officers and explained her plan. Instead of fighting the Nexari with guns, they would fight them with forms. Instead of destroying the enemy fleet, they would bury it in bureaucracy. This is our chance to test human administrative warfare, Admiral Yang announced. We will show the galaxy that proper documentation is more powerful than any weapon. The first step was to respond to the Nexari Declaration of War with proper paperwork. Administrator Li Jiyong from the Human Diplomatic Corps was brought in to handle this task. She had 20 years of experience in international law and treaty negotiation. Administrator Li sat down with the Nexari Declaration and began her work. The declaration was only 2 paragraphs long, but she identified 47 legal problems with it. The Nexari had not followed proper procedures for declaring war. They had not filed the correct forms with the appropriate authorities. They had not provided required justifications for military action. Administrator Li's response was a masterpiece of administrative precision. She acknowledged receipt of the Nexari Declaration, but explained that it could not be processed due to incomplete documentation. She provided a helpful list of all the forms that the Nexari needed to fill out before their declaration could be considered valid. The list included application for military action against sovereign species, environmental impact assessment for orbital bombardment, safety certification for weapon systems, insurance documentation for combat operations, and detailed justification for territorial claims. Each form came with its own set of supporting documents and reference materials. Administrator Li also included Form 27B, which required the Nexari to provide a complete inventory of their military forces. The form asked for detailed specifications of every ship, every weapon, and every piece of equipment in their fleet. It also required biographical information for every soldier, including education, training, and psychological evaluation records. The response was sent to the Nexari Confederation with a polite note, explaining that humans looked forward to processing their declaration once all proper paperwork was completed. The estimated processing time was 6 to 8 months, assuming the Nexari could provide all required documentation promptly. Meanwhile, Captain Kim Tae-hyung was working on Admiral Yang's secret weapon. He had been tasked with developing an automated system that could generate infinite paperwork in response to any hostile action. Captain Kim was a genius with computers, and he understood exactly what Admiral Yang wanted. The system was called the Automated Compliance Response Network, or ACORN. Captain Kim programmed ACORN to monitor all communications with alien species and respond automatically to any threats or aggressive actions. The system contained databases of thousands of forms, procedures, and requirements from human law and regulation. When ACORN detected a threat, it would immediately generate appropriate paperwork to address the situation. If aliens threatened to attack a human colony, ACORN would send them permit applications for military operations in that sector. If aliens demanded tribute, ACORN would send them tax forms and business license applications. The beautiful part of ACORN was that it could generate new forms faster than aliens could fill out old ones. Every response created new requirements, which triggered more responses. The system was designed to create an endless cycle of documentation that would overwhelm any species that tried to threaten humanity. Admiral Yang decided to test Acorn when the Nexari fleet arrived at Earth exactly 30 days after their declaration. The fleet was impressive with over 200 warships and enough firepower to destroy a planet. Admiral Yang was not impressed, because she had better weapons Nexari. Fleet Commander Zexcalon opened communications with Earth and demanded immediate surrender. He expected the humans to panic and beg for mercy. Instead, he received an automated response from Acorn explaining that his demand could not be processed without proper authorization codes. Acorn sent Commander Zexcalon a package of forms to fill out before his surrender demand could be considered. The package included Military Authorization Request 12C, Planetary Occupation Permit 45A, and Non-Combatant Safety Certification 78B. Each form was 12 pages long and required extensive supporting documentation. Commander Zexcalon was confused by this response. He had never heard of military authorization requests or planetary occupation permits. He tried to ignore the forms and ordered his fleet to begin attacking Earth's orbital defenses. This triggered Acorn's emergency response protocols. The system detected hostile military action and immediately sent Commander Zexcalon a priority package of emergency forms. These included Incident Report 23F for unauthorized weapons discharge, Environmental Damage Assessment 56G for space, Combat and Worker Safety Violation 89H for endangering non-combatant personnel. Every form came with detailed instructions for proper completion. The instructions referenced other forms which referenced other procedures which referenced other regulations. Acorn had created a documentation maze with no escape. Commander Zexcalon tried to continue his attack, but Acorn kept sending him more forms. When his ships targeted human installations, they received building safety inspection requirements. When they charged their weapons, they received energy discharge permit applications. When they prepared boarding parties, they received personnel transportation safety checklists. The Nexari computer systems began to struggle under the load of incoming paperwork. Their military computers were designed to handle targeting data and weapon controls, not complex administrative documentation. The forms kept arriving faster than the computers could process them. Captain Kim had programmed Acorn to adapt and learn from each interaction. Every time the Nexari ignored a form, Acorn would send them follow-up forms asking why the original forms had not been completed. Every time they tried to delete the forms, Acorn would send them file deletion authorization requests. Soon the Nexari fleet was receiving thousands of documents per minute. Their communication systems were overwhelmed. Their computer networks were crashing under the load. Their crew members were receiving individual forms asking about their personal compliance with safety regulations. Commander Zexcalon realized that his fleet was being defeated by paperwork. His ships could not function properly because their computers were too busy processing forms to handle normal operations. His weapon systems were unreliable because the targeting computers kept getting distracted by incoming documents. "We cannot fight like this," Commander Zexcalon told his senior officers. "These humans have weaponized their administrative systems. We are drowning in their bureaucracy." The Nexari tried one desperate move. They attempted to surrender to stop the flood of paperwork. But Acorn was ready for this too. The system immediately sent them Formal Surrender Application 91J, which required them to provide detailed explanations for their decision to surrender, complete inventories of all military assets, and psychological evaluations for all command personnel. Admiral Yang watched the Nexari fleet retreat from Earth with great satisfaction. Not a single shot had been fired, but humanity had achieved total victory. The aliens had been defeated by the simple power of proper documentation and administrative procedure. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the largest gathering of alien species in over 300 years. Representatives from every member civilization filled the Great Assembly Hall on Council Station Alpha. They had come together to address what many considered the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. Human Bureaucracy Council President Mordesh called the session to order with 3 strikes of the ceremonial gavel. The ancient Etherian leader had served as council president for over 2 centuries and had never seen the member species so united in their concern about a single issue. Fellow beings, President Mordesh announced in his deep voice, "We gather today to address the clear and present danger posed by the administrative practices of the human species. In less than 1 year, these newcomers have fundamentally altered the balance of power in our galaxy through the weaponization of paperwork." A murmur of agreement rose from the assembled delegates. In the past 12 months, humans had defeated 3 major military powers, disrupted dozens of trade networks, and caused the collapse of 2 interstellar governments. They had accomplished all of this without firing a single weapon or destroying a single ship. Ambassador Colthera of the Nexari Confederation stood to address the assembly. The proud warrior's 3 arms shook with emotion as she spoke about her people's humiliating defeat at the hands of human administrators. "The humans buried our entire battle fleet in documentation," Ambassador Colthera declared. "Our computers crashed trying to process their forms. Our weapon systems failed because our targeting computers were overwhelmed with permit applications. We were forced to retreat not because we were outgunned, but because we were outorganized." Similar stories came from delegates representing dozens of different species. The Vorthan Empire had abandoned their tribute collection efforts after receiving a single human questionnaire about proper taxation procedures. The Skarn Raiders had given up piracy entirely after humans sent them business license applications for illegal activities. Trade Representative Nelvak of the Merchant Guild described how human commercial practices were disrupting galactic commerce. Human traders required so much documentation for simple transactions that many alien businesses were choosing to avoid trade rather than deal with the paperwork requirements. "They want environmental impact statements for cargo delivery," Representative Nelvak complained. "They require safety certifications for products that have been used safely for thousands of years. They demand insurance documentation for transactions that other species handle with simple handshake agreements." But the most disturbing reports came from species that were beginning to adopt human administrative methods. The Delphian Republic had implemented human-style documentation requirements for all government activities. Their military had not engaged in any conflicts for 8 months because every proposed military action was tied up in permit applications and environmental assessments. The crystalline hives had established a new department called Administrative Compliance that required proper paperwork for all interhive communications. Productivity had decreased by 40%, but conflicts between different hives had dropped to 0. Even worse, some species were reporting that they actually liked the human approach to organization. The chaotic Zephyrian clans had voluntarily adopted human filing systems after discovering that proper documentation made it easier to coordinate activities between different clan groups. President Mordesh listened to all the reports with growing alarm. It was becoming clear that humans were not just using bureaucracy as a defensive weapon. They were spreading their administrative practices throughout the galaxy like some kind of organizational virus. "The time has come," President Mordesh announced, "to formally classify human bureaucratic practices as a weapon of mass destruction and take appropriate action to protect galactic civilization." The vote was unanimous. Every species present agreed that human paperwork posed an unacceptable threat to the traditional ways of conducting business throughout the galaxy. The Council authorized the formation of a military coalition to force humans to abandon their administrative warfare. News of the Council's decision reached Earth within hours. Diplomat Li Ji-young of the Human Diplomatic Corps received the official declaration while she was having lunch in her office. She read the document carefully while finishing her sandwich and then began her response. The Council's declaration was a masterpiece of poor legal drafting. It contained 17 procedural errors, violated 12 sections of existing galactic law, and failed to follow the Council's own rules for formal declarations. Li Ji-young was almost offended by the sloppy work. Her response was a thing of beauty. She acknowledged receipt of the Council's declaration, but explained that it could not be processed due to numerous legal deficiencies. She provided a detailed analysis of each error and included helpful suggestions for correction. The response also included Form 156C, which was a formal complaint about the Council's declaration. The form explained that the declaration violated proper parliamentary procedure and requested that the Council follow their own rules when making official statements. But Lee Ji-young was just getting started. She filed additional complaint, 23A, about the council's failure to provide proper notice before calling the emergency session. She submitted procedural challenge 45B, questioning the legal authority for classifying administrative practices as weapons. She included motion for reconsideration 67D, asking the council to review their decision using proper deliberative procedures. Each form came with supporting documentation, legal precedents, and reference materials. The package totaled over 400 pages and required responses to 87 specific questions about council procedures and decision-making processes. The council received Lee Ji-young's response and immediately called another emergency session. They had expected humans to respond with threats or military preparations. Instead, they had received a comprehensive legal brief challenging the validity of the council's actions. "They are doing it again," President Mordesh announced to the assembled delegates. "The humans have responded to our declaration of their paperwork being dangerous by sending us more paperwork. They have turned our own legal system against us." The situation became worse when other species began to study Lee Ji-young's response. Legal experts from across the galaxy confirmed that the human diplomat was correct about the procedural errors in the council's declaration. The council had indeed violated their own rules in their rush to address the human threat. This created a constitutional crisis. If the council's declaration was invalid due to procedural errors, then the military coalition had no legal authority to take action against humans. But if the council tried to fix the errors and issue a new declaration, they would have to follow proper procedures which could take months or years. Meanwhile, the coalition members were discovering that military coordination required massive amounts of paperwork when humans were involved. Admiral Vektosh of the Nexari fleet sent a simple message asking for battle plans and received a response asking him to complete Military Coordination Request 78G. The form asked for detailed information about his fleet composition, planned tactics, supply requirements, personnel qualifications, and command structure. It also required environmental impact assessments for any weapons that might be used near inhabited planets. Admiral Vektosh tried to ignore the form and coordinate directly with other coalition members. But they had received similar forms and were all asking each other for the same information. Nobody could begin planning military operations until all the paperwork was completed. Captain Kim Tae-hyung monitored the coalition's communications from his command center on Seoul's Pride. The Acorn system was working perfectly, automatically sending appropriate forms to every coalition member who tried to organize hostile activities against human interests. The automated system had learned to customize its responses based on each species' particular weaknesses. Military species received complex tactical coordination requirements. Commercial species received trade regulation compliance forms. Bureaucratic species received procedure verification checklists. But the most effective responses went to the political leaders who were trying to hold the coalition together. Every time they tried to schedule coordination meetings, they received Meeting Planning Requirements 34F, which asked for detailed agendas, participant qualifications, and facility safety certifications. Soon the coalition members were spending more time filling out forms than planning military operations. Their communications networks were clogged with administrative requirements. Their military commanders were drowning in documentation requests. Some species began to question whether fighting humans was worth the administrative hassle. The Skarn raiders withdrew from the coalition after receiving a package of insurance forms asking about coverage for military personnel engaged in hostile activities against organized opponents. The Merchant Guild pulled out when they realized that participating in military action against humans would require them to file Conflict of Interest Disclosure 89B with every trading partner they had ever done business with, even the mighty Vorthon. Empire began to reconsider their participation when they received Notice of Potential Legal Liability 123G informing Director Park Sora of the Terran Colonial Administration arrived at Galactic Council Station Alpha with the largest diplomatic mission in human history. Her transport ship carried 47 staff members, 12 tons of documentation, and what would become known as the most important peace treaty ever written in galactic history. Director Park had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. The galaxy was ready for change after experiencing the transformative power of human administrative methods. Species throughout the galaxy had requested assistance in implementing better organizational systems. The time had come to make the arrangement. The Galactic Council had spent weeks preparing for the human arrival. They had cleared the largest conference room in the station and installed additional computer systems to handle the expected documentation. They had also brought in administrative experts from every member species to help process whatever the humans might present. President Mordesh greeted Director Park with formal ceremony but genuine nervousness. The ancient Etherian leader had finally accepted that human bureaucracy was not a weapon to be defeated, but a tool to be understood. This meeting would determine whether that understanding could be turned into practical cooperation. Director Park, President Mordesh said, as they walked through the station corridors. The Council is prepared to discuss formal recognition of human administrative methods. We hope that we can reach an understanding that benefits all species in the galaxy. Director Park smiled politely and nodded. She had expected this approach from the aliens. They were ready to accept human methods, but they still thought in terms of limited agreements and partial implementation. They did not yet understand the scope of what humans were prepared to offer. The main conference room was filled with representatives from over 300 different species. This was the largest gathering in Council history and the first time that every galactic civilization had sent delegates to the same meeting. The humans had managed to unite the galaxy through the simple power of good organization. Director Park took her place at the speaker's podium and looked out at the assembled aliens. They represented thousands of different cultures, belief systems, and approaches to governance. What they had in common was a growing understanding that the old ways of doing things were not working as well as they could. Honored delegates, Director A. Park began. I bring you greetings from the people of Earth and an offer of partnership that I believe will benefit every species represented in this room. Humanity wishes to share our knowledge and experience in administrative science for the betterment of all galactic civilization. She gestured to her staff members who began distributing copies of the human proposal. The aliens watched nervously as thick binders were placed in front of each delegation. But these binders were different from previous human documents. They were organized clearly with helpful summaries and easy-to-understand explanations. The proposal was titled Comprehensive Framework for Galactic Administrative Cooperation and Peaceful Development. It was only 23 volumes long, which made it the shortest major document humans had ever presented to alien governments. Director Park had worked hard to make the proposal accessible to non-human readers. Each section included background, information explaining why certain procedures were important and how they would benefit participating species. There were examples and case studies showing how similar systems had worked in human society. The first volume outlined basic principles of good governance, including transparency, accountability, and procedural fairness. It explained how proper documentation could prevent conflicts by ensuring that all parties understood their rights and responsibilities clearly. The second volume covered trade and commerce regulations that would standardize business practices across species boundaries. The proposed system would make it easier for different civilizations to do business together, while protecting workers and consumers from exploitation. Volumes 3 through 7 detailed environmental protection standards that would preserve habitable planets and prevent ecological disasters. The humans had learned from their own mistakes on Earth and wanted to help other species avoid similar problems. Volumes 8 through 12 covered conflict resolution procedures, ranging from simple mediation to complex arbitration systems. The goal was to provide peaceful alternatives to military action that would be faster, cheaper, and more effective than traditional warfare. The remaining volumes covered topics including healthcare standards, educational cooperation, scientific research coordination, cultural exchange programs, and emergency response procedures. Every section was designed to make life better for average citizens throughout the galaxy. But the most remarkable aspect of the proposal was buried in Volume 17. The humans were offering to take responsibility for implementing and maintaining the entire system. They would provide the administrators, the computer systems, and the organizational expertise needed to make galactic cooperation work effectively. We do not seek to rule other species, Director Park explained, as the aliens read through the proposal. We seek to serve other species by providing the administrative infrastructure that will allow all civilizations to focus on what they do best, while ensuring that basic standards are maintained. The proposal included detailed job descriptions for thousands of human administrators who would work with alien governments to implement the new systems. These administrators would be trained in alien cultures and customs to ensure that human methods were adapted appropriately for each species ambassador. Velkaran of the Delphian Republic was the first to speak after Director Park finished her presentation. The Delphians had been implementing human administrative methods for over a year and had seen remarkable improvements in their society. The human proposal addresses every major challenge facing galactic civilization, Ambassador Velkaran announced. Environmental degradation, trade disputes, military conflicts, resource allocation problems. The solutions presented here are practical, fair, and achievable. Ambassador Thexmoller of the Merchant Guild agreed enthusiastically. His species had initially resisted human documentation requirements but had discovered that proper paperwork actually made trade easier and more profitable. Human administrative methods have revolutionized commercial relations in our sector, Ambassador Thexmoller reported. Disputes are resolved quickly through established procedures. Contract enforcement is reliable and predictable. Business planning is more accurate because all relevant information is properly documented. Even former opponents of human methods spoke in favor of the proposal. General Kexthorn of the Vorthan Empire admitted that his military had become more effective after adopting human organizational procedures. We initially saw human bureaucracy as a threat to military efficiency, General Kexthorn confessed. We were wrong. Proper planning and documentation have made our forces more capable, not less. We waste fewer resources and achieve better results because we know exactly what we are trying to accomplish. The debate continued for 3 days as delegates from EU. Every species examined the proposal in detail. They asked questions about implementation timelines, resource requirements, and cultural adaptation procedures. The humans had anticipated most of these questions and provided detailed answers. Director Park was impressed by the quality of the alien questions. They were asking about practical concerns rather than theoretical objections. They wanted to know how the system would work, not whether it should be implemented on the 4th day. President Mordesh called for a formal vote on the human proposal. The voting procedure itself had been designed using human administrative methods to ensure fairness and accuracy. Every delegate had multiple opportunities to ask clarifying questions before casting their vote. The result was unprecedented in Council history. Every single species voted in favor of accepting the human proposal. There were no dissenting votes, no abstentions, and no requests for amendments. The galaxy had unanimously chosen to adopt human administrative methods as the foundation for Galactic Civilization. Fleet Admiral Yu Jamin was selected as the first galactic chancellor under the new system. Admiral Yu had been chosen not because he was the most powerful military leader or the most influential politician, but because he was the only person in the galaxy who fully understood the filing systems that humans had created. Admiral Yu's first act as chancellor was to establish the Galactic Administrative Service with headquarters on Earth and branch offices throughout inhabited space. The GAS would be staffed primarily by human administrators working in partnership with alien specialists who understood local cultures and customs. The transformation of galactic civilization began immediately. Species that had been enemies for centuries began cooperating on trade and environmental projects. Military conflicts dropped to near zero as potential combatants discovered that proper documentation made peaceful resolution faster and easier than warfare. The Nexari Confederation, once the most feared military power in the galaxy, became the most effective peacekeeping force by applying human organizational methods to conflict prevention. Their former enemies now requested Nexari assistance in establishing stable governments and peaceful societies.